so real quick, just my history. I worked at an orphanage in Peru. I traveled all around the world. I had a good time doing it. Enjoyed it very much. I did medical care and dental, and shared a lot of love with people. But there were some things that just disturbed me that I saw in Peru. And everywhere you go, you see signs of this Spanish conquest type of behavior and the sort of tyranny that took over the place and how they spread the religion. So I started questioning religion. I also started questioning the teachers that were teaching me about history, and I started trusting myself intuitively there. I began to really sort of turn inward and what do I actually believe about all these things. Yeah, so all in all, my 5 years in Peru were really good, but they changed me. And moved back to Houston, didn't like it. All of a sudden, I was getting depressed over a lot of different things. Let's leave it at that. I wouldn't take pharmaceuticals, and I wouldn't shoot myself, but I threw away all my bullets. So I started to meditate, and after many weeks of meditation, I had a high energy experience that was later explained to me as a Kundalini experience. I started meeting these teachers that were showing up in my life all of a sudden. A Buddhist monk and a vibrational healer and Taekwondo, shaman of a tribe down in Colombia. And he has a documentary now called The Medicine that was just premiered at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Los Angeles about a month ago. And it's really a very good description of what he does, and I encourage you to watch that if you're curious about all this. But hold on, what exactly did I do? All right, what exactly happened? All right, I went where and with whom and took what, you know, and this was a shocking thing, really, to many people that I know, including my wife and my pastor and some of the people in my family, that instead of following pharmaceutical medicine with a doctor, a mental health professional, I would go down to Colombia and take poison with a witch doctor. Was, in essence, what it was perceived to be. What are we talking about here tonight? We're talking about ancient medicine, all right? And what is that exactly? It's plants, all right? That's what ancient medicine is. By and large, it's the natural plants of the land that are freely available to human beings who live on this land. And throughout history, you've had people, some had more knowledge than other of what the natural plants were and how they were used, and oftentimes it was powerful women who were midwives and people who knew about how to mix these things to treat physical and mental health. And you see it in markets all over South America. Ladies like this right here, she may not exactly know all the different plants, but she's in a network of ladies who do. They know everything. And when you go to places like Peru, and your grandparents and great grandparents, they knew about plants, and the taboo kind of plants in this country now are. They're scheduled as illegal, and coca leaves, marijuana, peyote, mushrooms, and ayahuasca vine. These are examples of what are classified as Class A narcotics, and you can go to jail for that, for the possession of these natural medicines. And so I encourage you not to break the laws of this land because people are pretty serious about it. You can go to a liquor store and buy enough booze to kill yourself and wreck everybody in your world's life. But you can't use the natural plants of the land, some of them. And there's been a sort of a systematic pulling away of our knowledge of natural plant medicine.
in all its various forms. So it's really timely that 2 weeks ago there was a 60 Minutes episode about this very thing. I don't know if any of you guys had a chance to watch it, but it was a very good show about how they are just now restarting research with psilocybin and other psychedelic drugs at Johns Hopkins and maybe some of the other research places too. For a long time, it's been illegal not just to possess it, not just to use it, but you couldn't even do any medical research on it or scientific research. It was completely banned. The 60 Minutes episode was pretty much about Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, and they had Michael Pollan on there, and he describes a lot of the history that's gone on. There's two real big takeaway points for me in that book. I went to see Michael Pollan when he came to Austin and got one of his books, and in that book, he talks about back in the 50s, they were doing tremendous research with psychedelics and natural plants like psilocybin mushrooms or synthetics like LSD, which is basically the same thing. And Alcoholics Anonymous, which is one of the most successful recovery programs in the world, all over the world, and it recognizes a power greater than ourselves. Well, Bill Wilson, in his quest to try to stop drinking, because he was a chronic alcoholic back in the 50s, lost his family, his job, everything. He took a psychedelic called belladonna and came up with the AA program. That's where it came from a psychedelic experience in which he recognized a power greater than himself, and that's what made him stop drinking. And he actually wanted to bring that psychedelic into the AA program, but he was overruled by the board because people are, the idea of the program is try to get people off any kind of outside substance. And so, but that was not in some back alley with a bunch of drug heads. Bill Wilson did that treatment at the VA hospital in 1956 under the supervision of doctors, and was tremendously successful. And because he went through that, he impacted the lives of millions of people. He said, Bill Wilson, I'm certain that the LSD experiment has helped me very much. Go ahead, sweetie. So Michael Pollan talks about, he believes that psychedelics are wasted on the young. And because the real therapeutic value of these psychoactive plants is an internal journey with eyes closed and self-reflection. That's where the real knowledge comes from. Your ability to look inside and communicate with yourself, in essence, to reach a higher understanding. But instead, young people tend to use it as recreation, and what they would say, what Taita Juanita would say, is without respect. These are natural, God-given plants that deserve a tremendous amount of respect, and setting, and supervision. And so what happened in the 60s, you've got all kinds of people using psychedelics, and you got rock bands, and you got Haight-Ashbury, you got major motion pictures about drugs, and changed the entire culture. And who do we have to thank for this? The monkeys got out of the laboratory with people like Timothy Leary, a Harvard professor of psychology, who decided he wanted to turn on the whole world, and they were able to acquire mass quantities of LSD, and they were passing it out everywhere. Also, another character who's rather mysterious is this man, Alfred Matthew Hubbard. He's been named the Johnny Appleseed of psychedelics, and he's has some connection to the Justice Department and to the ATF and Canadian government, but it's vague who exactly this guy was. But what we know for sure was that he got a hold of massive quantities of LSD and was turning on people all over the world. So what was happening? Without the respect and supervision, because we didn't have really elders to teach us how to do this, all of a sudden this stuff poured out of laboratories and people are using it without any guidance or supervision. There's young folks are showing up in emergency rooms all over the country. And there are big protests about the Vietnam War. And one of the things that these substances do is they make you question authority and they make you peaceful, and you don't really want to kill people. So whether you like that or not, Richard Nixon didn't like it. And so the Nixon administration, like I said before, they not only shut down the free use of psychedelics, of any of those natural plants, but he halted all research on helping people. And that was a long time ago in the Nixon administration. From then until now, most scientific research on how these things help human health have been eliminated. And so the 60 Minutes program was pretty much about how they're just now restarting that research and doing clinical trials and stuff like that. Schedule 1 drugs are defined as having no medical purpose whatsoever, and that's just not so. But again, it is against the law, and I encourage everyone to follow the law. War on drugs. It's also lucrative to keep it off the market. All right, you spend $1 trillion keeping drugs off the market. Millions of people have gone to jail. All kinds of court costs and whatnot. There's got to be some kind of balance, and I think that pendulum is now swinging back through the legal system as the research is coming back and people are seeing that's helping people. Dr. Jordan Peterson of Canada is a clinical psychologist. He said, amazing results with people quitting smoking, quitting alcohol, quitting heroin, post-traumatic stress. People who are near death and afraid of dying are instantly not afraid anymore. But the wheels of progress about all this are moving slowly. That's all by way of saying that there's a reason that the natural plants are on our land. That there are reasons why God put them on our land, and hopefully we'll have more progress about how to do that. So I wasn't going to take pharmaceutical drugs when I had depression, but I needed something, and I met a shaman. I had lived in South America for 8 years. And so I accepted the invitation of Taita Juanito, and I went down to his home 2 hours outside of Bogota. This is where you arrive in the mountains outside of Bogota, Colombia. You come up this dirt road, and there's a medical building there right when you get there, and you can keep turning. You're greeted and checked in to this facility. They show you around. It's basically biofeedback, colonics, yoga, meditation. They check your blood pressure. They got beautiful, you can slow just a little bit, but beautiful little cabins and stuff. It's not a 5-star hotel, but it's very accommodating, and in a lovely setting about 6,000 feet above sea level. And go ahead. They got lovely vegetarian food. There's all sorts of preparation. This is a 12-day healing retreat. And so you don't just go somewhere and drink this medicine and that's it. It's a whole comprehensive program. And they ask that before you go there, you eliminate meat, alcohol, smoking, social media, news. Try to clear out your mind and body as best you can, and then once you get there, they try to continue doing that. They've got treatments. First, it's a whole day of education. They'll talk about the history of ayahuasca and the use, how it's helped human beings and their tribe for hundreds or thousands of years. And there's Taita Juanito there in his element, and he's right in the middle of it. But you've got all these other shamans who are part of a very comprehensive team. You've got people who are musicians, people who are caregivers. Go ahead and turn. You've got dancers. There's always someone smudging somewhere, sage or copal or what have you. You've got these wonderful musicians come from all over Colombia, and they are very instrumental, no pun intended, in the whole process. There's a whole program of herbal steam baths to extract bitterness and also to put in sweetness into your body. And one of the amazing parts of this whole experience is there are about 50 people from all over the planet that come to this, and they're some of the most interesting people you ever met. Business people, scientists, natural health professionals, and people who are interested in all kinds of things. You know, it's an unusual group of people who can afford to go down there, who found out about it, and who are interested in raising their consciousness, learning something about themselves. They may have issues that they're trying to deal with, or they may just want to self-examine. And so it's really amazing. We get to spend 12 days with so many fascinating people from all over the world. You have two very well facilitated Indian sweat lodges. And there's a shaman there that explains all the different elements of that. We have one that's Native American, one's a native South American. That gentleman is South American. There's a lot of meditation. There's yoga. It's a very quiet place to retreat. They encourage music and a lot of self-reflection. They also handicrafts. They teach different types of handicrafts there. And so when the sun goes down on the third day that you're there, they call you up into ceremony. And it's a very sacred experience. In Colombia, not only is it legal, it's a time-honored tradition. And with most Amazon jungle countries, it's a honored and protected tradition to use the ayahuasca plant. And it's actually two plants that are boiled together. The team assembles in their uniforms, and it's a very colorful bunch of people. And some of the nicest, most attentive caregivers I've ever met in my life. They go into the building, which is a big, what they call the maloca. It's a very beautifully painted building with all sorts of different hand-painted things that people have seen while they're doing the ayahuasca medicine. This is what the building looks like. I wasn't allowed to take pictures while the ceremony was going on, but this is what it looks like inside in the daylight. And you got these little sort of chaise loungers that you can recline or sit up. And most people are reclining when they give you this medicine. And that's what it is right there. Those are ayahuasca vines that are, if you boiled ayahuasca, you could drink a whole gallon of it and it wouldn't do anything to you because there's enzymes in your stomach that block it. But if you combine it with this leaf, and I can't remember the name of it, but it will retain its strength, and it doesn't work without that leaf. And the big question that is always asked is, out of hundreds of thousands of Amazon jungle plants, how did they know which two to boil together in a pot and make this tea? How did that happen? And the answer is, the plants told us. Now, that may seem funny to us, but I just read a really interesting book on, it's called Plant Intelligence in the Imaginal Realm. And what it refers to a lot is the Kalahari Bushmen, and how they, in the midst of this modern world, they're still pretty much connected to the land. And their senses are much more open. The plants actually communicate with them. And the animals, the land, the water, they're far more sensitive because they're not so distracted as we are. So there's some credibility to that. That's the end of the slideshow. So this is where I went. I told my daughters eventually, Taita Juanito is my mental health professional, and they didn't exactly know what that meant, but they thought it was pretty cool. And I could talk to you for the rest of my life about what I experienced during these 4 nights of ceremony with ayahuasca. I've actually been down there twice, so I've done it 8 different nights. And it is oftentimes something that you can't communicate very well. And Terence McKenna, who's a famous Berkeley professor and psychonaut who's done seemingly every kind of drug on the planet, talked extensively. He died in 2000, but he has extensive talks on YouTube, and is a very articulate guy who describes in detail his experiences. And he said with ayahuasca, you can't, most of what you experience, you can't download into as low dimensional a language as English. And I would agree with that. But what ayahuasca is, in essence, is DMT, or dimethyltryptamine. Your brain has a naturally occurring dimethyltryptamine in it, but the ayahuasca just boosts it, and it's associated with dreaming and visions and your imagination, and so it kind of boosts the signal. My impression, my general impression, is it boosts your ability to adjust your radio and get a wider band of frequency, and that you can see beyond the veil for a short period of time. And I found this interesting. Before I go into what I experienced, and I'll tell you a couple of things about what I personally experienced, but I've been reading this book for the book club here that we have on Sunday, the book study. And this is called 1 + 1 is 1 by Howard Caesar. He was a unity minister for 30 years. He's associated with people like Marianne Williamson, Mary Morrissey, Michael Bernard Beckwith, and a lot of high-powered people, Deepak Chopra. And when we started reading this book, I didn't really expect that much out of it. I don't know what I expected, but I thought it would generally be about unity and oneness and so forth. But what he talks about here, and I've just gotten through the first chapter, but I was blown away by what he said. He has descriptions of 2 different trips that he's taken to India and Brazil. And to India, a woman came into his office and told him about this place called Oneness University. And what he says, he said they were about what I describe as the science and experience of oneness, offering sacred teachings, ancient processes, and mystical initiations that cannot be adequately described. all of which help to advance an individual towards a deepening consciousness of oneness. This is in India. He said awakening into oneness involves a neurobiological shift in the brain, becoming free of the mind. He said we are spiritual beings given mind to use, but not to be used by the mind. Our sacred, authentic self, the unchanging spiritual essence of who we are, that's really what we're trying to get at, whether it be through meditation or yoga or breathing exercises or plant medicines. That's the direction we want to go. He talks about the point is that energy is moving, flowing, and vibrating in and around us all the time. Nothing rests. Let us not get caught in smallness. Instead, let us begin to step into the big picture. There are forces working in our favor and on our behalf of which we are unaware. It does not deny their existence. We take for granted that a cell phone in our hand through invisible forces can connect to a friend across the planet and have us carry on a conversation. We take for granted that we can open on our lap an independent thin compartment called a computer, and on its screen, again through invisible forces, receive visual images of actual happenings of events across the world. As they happen, most of us don't fully understand how it works, and yet messages travel through the invisible, and we easily accept it. How is it, then, I ask, that it is so difficult for some to accept that we could receive messages and help from angels, light beings, entities, or whatever name you wish to give to discarnate souls or beings who are in service to humanity and bring good, though from beyond the veil of the physical world? Inside the universal principle of 1 + 1 is 1 comes the realization that this principle puts us in touch with and at one with any other and all dimensions and realms. Jesus said, "In my Father's house there are many dwelling places." I take that to mean, that's John 14:2. I take that to mean many realms, and one of those is the realm beyond the veil of this physical life. At times, the physical and non-physical worlds merge, and we can receive a thought from the other side or feel the presence of a loved one who has passed on, or receive guidance and healing. He had some amazing experiences. That was India that prompted him to say all that. He saw things that he could not see without the aid of those rituals that they showed him how to do in India. When he went to Brazil, again he says, what I experienced is difficult to put into words. The process of healing was being, even in their approach, as in all manifestations of healing, the openness, faith, and inner work within spiritual consciousness on the part of the individual is a necessary ingredient. What was new and unfamiliar was the understanding that the process of healing was being assisted and administered on an unseen level by loving light beings who were spiritually advanced and in service to God. As amazing as it may sound, I learned that just as there are doctors, nurses, and surgeons in this world, there are those of the same or greater knowledge and abilities beyond the veil who can be accessed to do their healing work on a level invisible to the human eye, just as the cell phone. In God's great house of eternal life, there exist other rooms and realms beyond the veil of this three-dimensional physical world in which we currently live, beyond the boundaries of our familiarity and what is conventionally accepted by yesterday's religion. Humanity must grow beyond its skepticism and closed rigidness of thought, so as to evolve and advance to the next wave of spiritual understanding, whose time has now come. I didn't expect that from a minister of 30 years. And it was very much in keeping with what I experienced when I went down to South America and took ayahuasca. As I said, many of those things, like him and his two different experiences, a lot of it's hard to describe. But what I can tell you, when people ask me, well, what did you get out of it? The very first thing that comes to my mind is my dad. My dad died about 5 years ago, and I was holding his hand when he died, and I didn't shed a tear. And I loved my dad. And in the last 20, 30 years, we had a very good relationship. But when I was a teenager and in my 20s, we had a very frictional relationship, and it's my belief that I had built walls against him to protect myself. And when he died, it didn't register with me at all. It's just like, wow, there he goes. And my mom and my wife thought that was really unhealthy, and maybe it was. But it's just this, I didn't feel anything. And so when I went down to Colombia and took this medicine, I think it was on the first night, I had a series of very clear memories that I hadn't thought of since they actually happened. All of a sudden, I was a little boy again. I was in my little pajamas with the feet on them, and my brother was there, and he was in the same pajamas, and we were strategizing on how we're going to attack Dad on the bed, and Dad's up there growling like a bear, I remember it just crystal clear. I was there, all right, and we were in my parents' bedroom. I could see the type of bedspread they had back in the 60s, and it was crystal clear. And he was growling, and we were fighting and wrestling and having a great time. And then boom, we're in Indian Guides, if you know what that is. It's like Cub Scouts. Dad's, we got our feathers on. Dad's making crafts, and he's teaching us things. And then boom, we're in another memory of Little League Baseball. We got our uniforms on. Dad's teaching us how to pitch, how to bat, And then boom, we're in the car, and he's laughing and singing, and we're having a good time. We're going somewhere. And then boom, we're hunting birds later. And shooting, and he's congratulating us on good shots, and then we're around the fire. And in that moment, I remembered how much I loved my dad. It makes me cry every time I say this. I remembered that he was my friend, and I loved him very much. And with that, I burst into tears, and I cried more than I had cried since I was a little boy. And I mean, one of those deep gut type cries, slobbering all over the place. And I mourned his death there. Now, I could have spent years in therapy trying to get to that place. This took me there in about 5 minutes. All right, who knows? Time and space, you lose all that under the influence of this. But it was not like I remembered it. It was like I was there with him. And I don't have to try to convince you of this. It's not important to me that you believe me or not. What's important is that it was real to me. And now, whenever I think of my dad, I remember those hard times that we had. But my primary memories have now been altered. My primary memories are of those wonderful little experiences that we had as a kid, and that we were friends. And yeah, we had some friction, but this was the central core to our relationship that I had forgotten. And I left a ton of baggage about my dad in Colombia, and I don't have it anymore. All right? And that alone was worth the trip down there. And taking the risk, which I was scared. I've been a member of a Baptist church for over 20 years. I was a Baptist missionary in Peru. And this was a big deal to go down and do this and take this risk. I was scared. The first night, it was the most comforting thing you can imagine. Well, another thing that happened, and I don't exactly know how to interpret it, but what Howard Caesar talks about is these doctors and nurses and surgeons. They'll tell you when you do this ayahuasca experiences, there's 4 common experiences. One of them is going back and examining things in the past, which happened to me clearly. Another one is cosmic surgeons, and that happened to me. They came and lifted me into a operating theater, and they started working on the left side of my brain. And I wasn't afraid. I knew they were doing something good. And while I was there during those nights of ceremony, they worked on my brain, they worked on my left ear, they worked on my heart, they replaced my heart. They did one other thing too. And anyway, I wrote a 35-page field report every morning after this happened. I'd write down everything I could remember about it. And the cosmic surgeons were another one. A third thing they talk about is a big vision. And I'm here to tell you the greatest honor of my life was being lifted out of my body, up through the ceiling and into the heavens. And I was led into a receiving hall. And there were these card people. They were tall and kind of square, and they sort of, in black and white, they reminded me of Alice in Wonderland and the Queen of Hearts, you know, these card people. And as I was looking at them, they started saying, "Hey, he can see us." And there was a whole line of them, and they were like, you know, "He can see us, look." And then so they all started greeting me, and they were surprised that I could see them. And they started giving me a couple of gifts, and they were saying welcome and leading me down this hallway. And when I came into the next room, it was an enormous concert hall. And it was like the Kennedy Center is what I can relate to it. And I was on the main stage, and it was filled to the brim with light beings. And they were colorful, and sometimes they looked like fireworks, and sometimes they looked like little jewels, and they were giggling, and they were all excited that I could see them and that they could communicate with me. And they were telling each other, "Hey, look!" And they were throwing things at me. They were throwing little jewels. I call them gifts, but they were little sensory gifts. And they would touch me, and I would feel a pleasure. And they would say, "Yeah, you can feel that." And I'd say, "Yeah, oh yeah." And so they all started giving me these little gifts, and it became overwhelmingly pleasurable what they were doing in honor to me. And I started to protest that I wasn't worthy of so much attention. You know, I was overwhelmed. And when I started to tell them I was overwhelmed, I was not worthy. And you don't talk in words in this environment. You know, it's all nonverbal. But when I told them that I was unworthy, they howled with laughter. They just howled laughing. And they thought it was the funniest thing they had ever heard. You could hear the laughter reverberating down the hallways of this place. And they said, "That's because you think too much, Stevie. You're a king, and you deserve all this and more. But you have to remember that you have to be a good king. You have the ability to give joy to people and make them smile. And so you have to share the gifts. You can't just take the gifts. You have to share the gifts. And everybody has gifts. You have to share them and share the gifts. It was the greatest honor of my life to do that. And I was just completely humbled and overwhelmed by the whole thing. And as they were lowering me back down into my body. I looked down and I could see my physical body laying on that little chaise lounge I was just showing you earlier. I could see it down there, and I was like a feather-light grid of energy, and I was crying, and I was telling them thank you, and they kept saying to me, "Don't forget who you are. Don't forget who you are." And laid back down, and when I connected with my body, there was a, just like I had like a electric connection somehow, and I was so happy to be back in that body, and that is indelible on my mind, as you can tell. There will never be a day of my life where I will forget these events, and those light beings are as real to me as you're sitting here now. All right, and they are there. I can't see them in my everyday life, but I know they're there. And they are, when I think of God now, I don't think of one. I think of many. And it's a great big space up there. And and then there was a whole other exercise that went on after that. And you kind of what they call drunk on the medicine, and as you're coming back into your body and your surroundings, you're a little incapacitated, not badly. I mean, if you have to go to the bathroom, you could get up and go, and they have all those nice people who are helping you throughout this whole thing. And people may not be going through pleasurable experiences. They may be seeing things that are troubling. I had some of those too. And these folks will come along and they'll blow some sage on you, and they'll sing little songs to you, and they'll, they have these little ikaros, these little things that they say to you, and if you're having a problem, they give you comfort and care, but the whole thing about the body, the physical body, was amazing, and it was. I was kind of laying there exhausted after all of that, and there's this voice started talking to me. Body's getting cold. You have to put a sweater on the body. Take care of the body. The body's good. You have to be careful. It's a great body, and you have to be good to the body, and now the feet want attention. The feet are colder. Put some socks on the feet, and so on. And it went on, and then it was get your water bottle and give the body hydration. The body's dry, and like I say, there's a lot of it that just can't be downloaded into English. But the upshot of the experience is very much what Howard Caesar talks about. There's a lot more to this than just being a physical person trying to survive, and I've been honored to be a part of it. From the outside looking in, my marriage ended. I left the Baptist church. I didn't like working for that big real estate company in Houston. I left there, and I didn't like Houston. I left there. After my marriage was over, I didn't have a reason to stay. And some folks would look at that and say, gosh, that's tragic, Went down to South America, drank poison with witch doctors, and destroyed your life, And I could see how they might see it that way. And it is not my intent to contest anyone, certainly any of my Christian friends, because I got a lot of them, and I don't want to tell them they're wrong, because I have been comforted and benefited from being in that protected environment for many years, but something crossed over in me through all this, and through those other experiences I've had with Kundalini, which we'll talk about in a few weeks, and through meditation, and I believe what Howard talks about is we need to move to the next level. I'm doing whatever I can to raise the consciousness of this planet. That's my job now. All right. Whatever else I have to do to survive and take care of my little girls, to speak my authentic self and for you to speak yours is important. All right? It's important that you can say, you know, I saw this, I felt this. This is my genuine human experience. Because it gives other people comfort to do the same. And I would never tell anyone that they should go out and try ayahuasca or, some plant medicine. I think these things sort of have to call to you when you're in the right state of life. But I can tell you what my experience was, and it was good. I just hope that as we move forward, we are now in a major epidemic in alcoholism, drug abuse, opioids, these anxiety and depression medications. It's my belief that pharmaceutical companies are good, but they've grossly overreached in managing people's state with chemicals. And it is my hope that the pendulum will swing back, because these natural plants are on the planet for a reason, and we should be free to use them. And so I think that's all I have to say about that.
I just want to say that I don't believe that in that book Howard Caesar says he did ayahuasca.
No,
I just want to clarify.
Yeah, he did not.
Through meditation, he has decades of meditation.
Yes, that's correct.
That's the natural way to alter your mind.
Right, and it is not necessary to take the natural plants. There are other ways: meditation, breathing. These rituals that he doesn't even really describe and can't describe exactly. But they have methods over there. There's been a general discouragement of things like meditation in the West. We are not taught from children to silence our mind and put them in neutral. And there's a tremendous power that comes from that.
There's a big shift in the school systems for mindfulness.
Yeah, it's coming.
They're teaching.
It's coming, yeah.
Beginning to.
And instead of detention, they put you in meditation hall or something. And it is a natural exercise that are good for people. It's part of the reason, in my opinion, why the left brain logical has swung so far out of balance in this country and in the West in general. You don't have that as much in Eastern philosophy. And so, anybody have a comment? Question? Yes, ma'am.
I had a retinal bleed. This has been years and years ago. Oh, thank you. I had a retinal bleed. It's been about 10 or 12 years ago. And when I looked it up online, this was going to take months to go ahead and disappear. Well, I had a friend that's a shaman, and she's an amazing woman. Unfortunately, she's developed Parkinson's now, but she's such a healer. And she said, Bree, get some Traumeel and put that in your eye 3 times a day, and it was a herb. Uh-huh. And within 3 days, all of that blood was gone.
Unbelievable.
And I mentioned it to the doctor when I went for my. Well, they didn't want to hear about that.
No,
obviously.
Of course not.
Right.
Yeah. That's amazing. And what's happened systematically is that we are not taught what our natural plants do. When you go to third world countries where they don't have the money to go run to the pharmacy or to make a doctor's appointment, they still have knowledge what the natural plants do. But I think one of the most valuable things you can teach a young person is, what do these plants do? Otherwise, they just look like plants. You don't know that it could solve a toothache or cure indigestion or cure a fungus or something. You have no idea because nobody taught you. We don't have elders that teach us stuff like that. Thank you. That's really good.
when I was raising my kids, we didn't have insurance. We were pretty poor. And all three of them grew up with nothing but chamomile tea and honey. And I said, you cannot get sick. We don't have insurance. And I'm the doctor. Drink this.
Yeah. Well, it's a natural plant.
Oh, and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's really, really good stuff.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
My child, who's with me, is going to be 16 next month.
Congratulations.
And except for the 2 per year legal doctor's visit from birth to 2, my child's never been to a doctor. Not been vaccinated. I can count on one hand the fevers. So
Right.
it's doable.
Right. My daddy lived to be 87 years old, and he maybe went to the doctor 5 times in his whole life. And that was only when he had a problem. He never went to the doctor. And he smoked, he drank, he ate red meat. He wasn't the least bit healthy. But he said not going to the doctor was the best advice he could give anyone. And I'm not saying that that's what you should do. That's what Daddy taught me, so, yeah. The hospitals are one of the worst places to be sick because there's so many diseases in them. Now, thank God for emergency rooms. Lord knows I've been in them before a bunch of times. And thank God for pharmaceuticals when the time is right. I had malaria one time. It saved my life when they gave me that chloroquine sulfate down in Columbia. I was there another time. And, there's nothing like a good opioid when you've got a busted leg, all right? But these things need to be used with respect. And again, with all manner of different substances, it's swung way out of balance. And whether it's the pharmaceuticals companies pushing it on us or the alcohol and respect in all circumstances, especially when it comes to these powerful natural plants. And certainly, I would never advise anyone to break the law. That's why I left the country and went to another country where it's legal and protected.
So, were you medically supervised while you were down there? And how did they know the dose to give you? Is one question.
They have their way, and they kind of size you up. You go to, you go into that. It's not really a medical building with doctors. They have biofeedback. They've got colonic. They've got different types of natural. It's an ethnobotany center where they have all sorts of tinctures and things that they use. But there are no medical doctors that I know of that are present. They take your blood pressure. That's one thing they want to make sure that you don't have real high blood pressure because it can raise your blood pressure. Terrence McKenna said, I don't think ayahuasca is dangerous, except there could be death by astonishment. And it is astonishing what you may see under the influence of that. But you go to a council meeting, a private meeting with Taita Juanito and several of his council, and they ask you some questions about your health, and they size you up, kind of by weight, and they pour a cup accordingly, but they do it intuitively. And you're not headed for a hospital when you go there. It's they have their own way, and they bring in his grandfather just turned 109, and he was present when we were there. He's still alive. I don't know if he still comes, but he talked at some length. Standing and talking at what they said was 109 years old. He looks 109 years old, but was telling us all about the history of it and that they had been using it for thousands of years to help human beings get better and to be all that they could be. And so they, If you want to go to a medical type facility, there is a place in Costa Rica. It's called Rhythmia. And Rhythmia was founded by a guy named Gerald Powell. And if you want to look at a good video, I think it's a good video, look up Mrs. Moon's Medicine. That's a good video on YouTube because it'll tell you Jerry Powell's story. He was a multimillionaire addict to everything. He was angry, he was addicted to drugs, to sex, to alcohol, to fast cars, and nobody liked him. All of his relationships were bad. He actually attempted suicide once and was thinking about doing it again when someone encouraged him to go down to Costa Rica, I believe, and take ayahuasca. Within 1 week. This guy had been in therapy for 5 years every week. His therapist is on that movie I just told you about. He said, we tried family therapy, we tried Gestalt therapy, we tried, sports therapy, we tried every kind of therapy you can think of, and nothing worked. This guy was, a wreck. And he went down there, and in 1 week, he drank this medicine, and now he's all better. He said, I didn't know what to say, so that's a very good little film that'll help you understand, a little bit of what it's about. But the Rhythmia facility that Jerry built as a result of that, which is about a $10 million facility, it's a 4 or 5 star resort by the beach in Costa Rica, and it has a full-blown clinic there with nurses and doctors, and they actually formally check you in. And Taito Juanito goes up and facilitates those. He's the facilitator of those ceremonies there. And from what I gather, doing ceremonies up there in Costa Rica, they pay him well. He takes it back to Colombia, and he's building up his facility down there. And I was honored from the get-go, and I felt I'd fallen into the Mercedes-Benz of these types of experiences. I felt very blessed to be tremendously well cared for, and have such a team. There's probably 25 people that care for these 50 people, cooks, musicians, shamans, people that do all different kinds of special things, and healers of the highest order. And not to mention the people who gather there, many of them are healers of the highest order. And so, I felt very safe there. But do you have any guarantees when you go and do this kind of thing? No, you do not. But
Yeah.
do you really when you go to the hospital either?
Well, I've read about Rhythmia, and it looks very beautiful and very hygienic and very modern and great, but it's also extremely expensive.
Right.
But he's done a good job.
He's got a lot of the sports figures and movie stars and people like that are coming down there.
Yeah.
In fact, what's that guy's name? He's a famous actor. He's in Mrs. Moon's Medicine. He was the black officer in Iron Man with Robert Downey Jr. I can't remember his name. But a lot of people are doing it. Tony Robbins, who's a motivational speaker, he's done it, and there are a lot of people talking about it. There's a lot of buzz going on right now about ayahuasca, and you'll hear more about it as we go along. And in my opinion, the reason you're hearing that is because it works. It works. Is it a cure-all? Do you take it and your life just gets better instantly? No. What they talk about is it'll reveal things to you and give you 50%, and you have to do the other 50%. But it quickly...
People who have really, really bad experiences.
Yes.
In Dallas.
Yes, I agree.
It's really, really bad.
Mm-hmm. Scary, and that is true. And there's a lot of charlatans who are doing this stuff. And so, like I say, I felt very blessed and lucky that I fell in with Juanito. Met him in the swimming pool of my friend's house in Costa Rica, and that's about all I can say is it helped me. And so, anybody?
Well, I was lucky enough to use ayahuasca a year ago, and it was in a controlled, legal, safe setting that was very structured. It was very spiritual, with a lot of support staff also to make sure everybody was okay. And it was absolutely wonderful. For hours, I just felt waves and waves of love and bliss. Cried and laughed and chanted and felt full of love and bliss. And so...
Yeah, I tend to think that part of what it does is it lifts a lot of heavy energy off of you. And it may be in the lifting. It's called a purgative. It's not only a purgative of your mind and consciousness where it's trying to lift heavy energy like that, all that baggage with my dad, but it's also physically purgative. And it will cause you to have diarrhea, to throw up sometimes. They say it clears parasites, bacteria, fungus, all kinds of things out of your body.
Yep.
And that's why prior to going there, you want to be real clean already, and with your mind too.
Yeah, that's one reason why I wanted to take it is I've battled parasites and intestinal stuff for many years. I got very sick in Mexico as a young person and never was quite the same again. And I read a lot about it, the plant medicine, for several years. I really considered this for a long time and read about it. And one reason I wanted to do it is a purgative of parasites and stuff. So
you suppose it helped?
I didn't see any result on that, but it was 100% positive. It was wonderful.
All right. Anybody else? Well, thank you for coming tonight. I love you very much. And if you ever have any questions about these sort of things, you can always contact me. I love talking to folks, and my email is on the back of those flyers. Yeah. Now remember, we don't have a meeting next week, and I'll be out of town, and then the following week we do. Yes. Yeah, because we have Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we've got a songwriter showcase and then Thanksgiving. So
Yeah.
two in
November.
November.
Okay.
December. Yeah, 2 in November, 2 in December.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming out.
Website and Facebook page because I updated those.
Yeah.
So no Halloween.
Yeah, no Halloween meeting. But anyway, thanks a lot. I love you.